Apologies for the slight delay. Let me know if my mic sounds okay. It should do, but slightly different position because this just feels much better posture-wise. I think I was in a mess. But we've got a massive show for you today. We've got Mike Macdonald's first introductory press conference that we're going to talk about. As you can see from the title, we're going to break it down from organization, player first stuff, his personality, our general impressions of that, then offense and defense comments, what we've gleaned about that. And we also have coordinated chatter. There's already significant news when it comes to Seattle hiring an offensive play caller and a defensive play caller. But before that, Griff, do you want to do a preamble? It's good to see returning overloaders, some new overloaders, although actually one of the new overloaders made a very unfortunate comment. So,
who?
Don't worry. Christopher, that's so kind of you. Matty's 8 hours ahead of Pacific time. I don't care if he's an hour or 3 late. It's damn fine he does this at all when he could be sleeping. That's right. Tell him, Christopher. Tell him. But we're only like half an hour-ish late. It was just my fault I coordinated it with Griff, but I didn't update the description, so I apologize for that. Well. Amy saying, hit the like button. Yes, please. Please do like the pod. Jay, good to see you. Good to see everyone here. Griff, have you got anything?
No.
Mojombo. Why? I always have an issue pronouncing that, and I don't know why. I just can't read. Mojombo says, last time the podcast was exactly on time, within 5 minutes was the Ravens game. Being on time is a bad omen. Although what people are leaving out about the Seahawks collapse was the fact that, Griff, you stepped away from the podcast to do other things. At what point in the season?
Was that right after the Ravens game?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
So really, the Seahawks run defense, their slide, Vulcan should have fired Griff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was struggling through that all on my own. It was difficult.
I'm sorry.
But anyway, it's a new year. It's a new day. Jordan, thank you so much. Nice picture, Jordan, as well. Love that.
Very kind of you.
Jordan, if you think of a question, you ask it. I'll get to it.
We'll answer it.
Yeah, because that's very kind. Thank you. If you want to donate, there's a Stripe link. There's a super chat feature, which Jordan's very kindly used. So please do that. Preston, good to see you as well. Right. Should we get this thing kicked off? Are you going to beat the chat, Griff?
Hit it, Matty.
Oh. Welcome to the Seattle Overload podcast, where today is the day in which Seahawks head coach Mike Macdonald has had his introductory press conference as Seahawks head coach and also his first radio appearance of the season. Ty, you've just what are you doing? There's so much feedback.
Hi,
Can
Ty.
you hear the feedback?
Oh, shoot. Hold on. Sorry. I'm so sorry. Okay.
You just ruined my intro, Ty. I can still hear you, bro.
Jesus. I'm so sorry. This is such an L. Hold on.
Ty's name on here as well, chat, is X Nasty.
What does that mean?
I don't know.
Quit making stuff up. Quit showing off.
Ty, are you coming in or not? 1 second. Should I just do the intro and then let you in? And then you're going to mute yourself? Okay. Well, what if we just do that? No? Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to go on my computer, actually.
Great. Should I run the show? Are we going to keep chat waiting for you?
Sorry, chat. Sorry?
Shall I just go ahead and you just join in?
Just intro and I'll hop in.
Great.
I'll hop in. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
We'll
Ty.
do it live.
Great to see you.
We'll do it live.
Right. Okay. Let's do this again. Welcome to the Seattle.
Oh, was I late? Shit.
This is a shambles. This is an actual shambles. I'm done. I'm done with this.
We're having a good time.
120 people watching us melt down.
We're like John Schneider trying to introduce Mike Macdonald.
We're having a good time. The
Very
collective
awkward.
we. Right.
Yeah.
If this, Griff, are you going to tell me to do anything, or are you just going to let me do it?
Go ahead. The floor is yours. You actually did it again.
Welcome to the Seattle Overload podcast, where Mike Macdonald has had his first press conference as Seahawks head coach, his intro presser. He's also been on the radio for the first time doing a radio hit. There's a lot we can learn and take away from all of this. He's spoken about the organizational similarities between Baltimore and Seattle. He's talking about how he's a player-first guy. We've learned a bit about his personality. We've learned about the offense, the defense. We're going to explain some of the stuff he talked about. We're going to kind of project what he was doing as well. And then after that, there's also big news when it comes to the Seahawks search for play callers in their offensive coordinator search, and significant news in their defensive play caller search too. So, Griff, Macdonald.
Yeah.
Young Macdonald, 36.
What about?
He didn't have a farm, but he did do a press conference. What's your overall impressions of that?
Yeah, trying to get the gauge of personality, because that's something everyone cares about in their head coach. He definitely is more reserved, but you can definitely see that he has a lot of personality to him. He's just not extroverted. And when you watch the mic'd ups with him, he gives great rapport with his players. It's just in his own way. And I liked how he talked about authenticity. It doesn't matter what your style is, so long as you're authentic and you care about the people that you're interacting with and stuff. So on that note, I love his whole shtick. It's his version of it, and I like it. And I'm curious. I'm curious to see how it grows. I really want to see him interact with the players during minicamp and everything. I also want to see how he interacts with the offensive players, because he won't have the same relationship with them as he does the defensive players, because he's not coaching them on the details. That will be a little more. That will be a little more. I don't know what the right word is. Not superficial, but it will be less, nitty gritty with them. So I'm curious to see what that looks like.
Ty, you said I think, I don't know if it was on air or off air, but you were talking about how you remember the time when Pete Carroll had his introductory press conference and how you felt then. You kind of felt, and you were younger, maybe some could say more naive.
Impressionable, maybe.
Yeah.
Naive.
But ultimately correct in your assessment that you felt after that presser that Pete Carroll would win a Super Bowl in Seattle. Are you getting similar vibes from Macdonald? How do you feel about his opening presser?
I think vibes wise, I feel pretty good. I feel like he checked off pretty much every box that you could want him to. He said all the right things. He didn't really come off too robotic or anything like that. He seems like a pretty chill dude. I don't think there's really any other way to put it. He seems pretty open and honest as much as he can be, without giving too much away. He seems like an interesting dude that I'll enjoy listening to, on a weekly basis, hearing his thoughts. And, I think judging from, because, yesterday and the day before, I spent a lot of time watching some of his press conferences the last couple of years, some of the interviews that he did when he first became the DC in Baltimore. And he seems just pretty open, honest, authentic. Pretty much everything you want. Obviously he's different than Pete, but I was a little bit worried, and obviously vibes aren't really much, but I do want to like the guy, right? I was a little worried that he was going to be, that whoever the head coach was going to be kind of closed off, just kind of a hard ass, basically, for lack of a better term. He doesn't seem like that. So far so good, I guess. As much as we can glean in a day and a half. But yeah, I like him so far.
Yeah, I think his youth is obvious, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's just who like he is right now, and it's going to be interesting seeing how a relationship with John Schneider, which is obviously in its very early stages, is going to kind of develop. Like seeing the two of them up there on the stage, they had some interesting interactions, and the main news out of this though is that Mike Macdonald is going to be calling defensive plays, and he kind of explained it in a way that we sort of did when we talked about his hiring yesterday. He was saying how essentially right now is the plan to be calling plays, but depending who the DC is, and he wants to coach the football team as the head coach, but when the DC is ready to go and they see it the same way, that's when they'll make the change. So kind of a transitional period as he kind of installs his defensive system, and they obviously still have to hire a DC and OC, which we'll talk about a bit later, but kind of as expected, Griff.
Yeah. And guys, I think Amy brings up a good point. On the attractiveness scale, he probably does stack at the top. You might ballpark him with Sean McVay, but I think I think you still stack him above Sean.
Good jaw.
Good point, Amy.
Yep.
Okay, so that's obviously
Overload,
even more
brother.
important to that defensive play calling thing. Yeah.
Oh, and about his play calling. You wanted to know about his play calling? Me? Okay. Yeah. We can segue into talking about football if you want. He it is interesting that he wants to do the play calling, right? So I wonder if he'll actually name a DC. It's his first year, so like the way that he can assert the most control and influence in his mind, you would think is like, well, let me call the plays. He's only called plays for 3 years now. Because he called 1 year in Michigan, right?
Yeah. Correct.
And then so I mean, he really hasn't done a whole lot of it, right? So he probably wants to like get his fill, and he probably thinks that's the best way he can again, just what I said earlier, enact more influence over the results of the team. So
right, I did feel, and again, it's a transition for him. I did feel some of his responses to questions, not just in the presser, but also on the radio, they still sounded more like a defensive coordinator talking than a head coach. But this has all happened very quickly, and he, last Sunday he was literally calling plays against the Kansas City Chiefs to try and get into the Super Bowl. So there's a transition there. I also felt generally there's kind of an overall impression that they still have to work quite a few things out. Like obviously they need to hire an OC and a DC. We've got some offense and defense ideas, but what really shone through from whatever they're going to actually decide and end up doing, he really talks about how it's a player first thing. And I found a podcast which he went on, and I should have remembered the name, but it's on my Twitter, but he went on it in this past off season. And he was mentioning how impressed he is at how much the players are able to do in the NFL and how just they make everything look so smooth and good. But it's clear he also cares about the players from a personality perspective. And he was saying how it's all about the players. They're trying to build something special, and the players are the ones that drive the bus and they lay it on the line, and the guys on our team, referring to Baltimore, they did that. And also in this presser, he said about when they talk about their vision and how we want to play in the direction, he was asked then about a play like a Raven identity, and he said that's obviously not going to be a thing in Seattle, but he'd like a similar thing, but also he wants to get input from the players as well, and what do they want to see when we turn on the tape. Like he wants to know what they think a Seahawks player should be playing like. And so this kind of, as he builds an identity and a culture post Pete, he said he didn't want to throw everything out because it was clearly a winning culture, but putting his stamp on that, it's going to be a fairly long process, but to have that player involvement really stood out to me. Like he's really going to put the players first.
Yeah.
So on the coordinator thing, he did mention, of course, that the idea is to bring in a DC that he can essentially kind of groom into the role of play calling eventually. Like they would decide at a certain point that he would hand over the reins. But yesterday we were kind of talking about how, when Sean McVay took over in LA, they brought in Wade Phillips to be his DC, a veteran coach who wasn't really getting opportunities for head coaching jobs. So they took advantage of that, and that kind of worked out for him to have kind of that veteran coach to lean on. And so we've kind of talked about that idea from the offensive side of things. Griff, last night you mentioned Frank Reich, but I was talking about this on my Patreon podcast earlier today. No free ads. And wondering if maybe
hang on, Ty. What's the name of the podcast?
Patreon.com/control the zone. But no free ads. Anyway, so we were kind of wondering if maybe for that DC role, you could essentially bring in a veteran coach for Macdonald to more so lean on as more so of an advisor, but could you use that role to do that? It doesn't have to be him for just the sake of the example, like Lovie Smith.
Well, I think like a veteran name who'd make more sense in that instance would be like Wink Martindale, right?
Yeah.
But
could be
because there's tree crossover and scheme crossover. But my take on that comment specifically was, I think he's fine going young. I think he's just gonna embrace that. I think that I mean, Griff, what's your thoughts?
I don't know. I think we'll know more about just until he makes hires, right? Until he brings guys in. I do think it's interesting that Carl Scott was retained under.
That's the big news today, isn't it?
Right. Under the title of senior defensive assistant. Who knows if that's whoever reported that actually knows that. I feel like it would make sense to just have him stay on as the DB coach. I feel like Carl Scott could have gotten a DB position coach somewhere else. And senior defensive assistant is really like, it's kind of a lesser job, and depending on what the actual title is.
Yeah, and I guess they probably need to work that out still, depending on who if there is a DC, who that is, But
yeah, but I also go
Matt
ahead.
Zenitz, the National College Football reporter for 247 Sports and CBS Sports, who reported that Carl Scott's being retained.
Yeah. And I think that also relates to, Matty, you talked about the culture, like Macdonald wants to keep, institute like a new culture, not just be the Ravens, but be the Seahawks. I do wonder if keeping Carl around wasn't just like on merit, because obviously he's a terrific DB coach, but wanting to have some sort of continuity with the players and how important the DB group is for his scheme and everything.
And we should say there is from stuff that we've looked at there, and we sort of said it yesterday as well, but there's some real kind of similarities in the coverage tools that they're going to use this year to last year, but also what Carl Scott's worked with in the past, the kind of cover 4 checks versus different receivers. There's real overlap with the Fangio coverage system as well, but also obviously that what Scott worked with Nick Saban as well is always going to work nicely. So, and I think he's clearly a pretty good coach. It's also noteworthy that Tom Pelissero on the January 29th, which is last Monday, he reported that when Clint Hurt was hired as the Eagles D-line coach, expected to hire, they also expected Carl Scott to go coach the Philadelphia defensive backs. And so perhaps with Zenit's reporting today that Desai's turned that offer down and is remaining in Seattle, and also seen the defensive assistant title, that's how you keep him from going anywhere, and maybe you work out his exact role afterwards. But you'd think he'd be involved with the DBs and the coverage installation to some degree, right?
Yeah, you would. Agreed.
Yeah, but that's kind of what I got, Ty, was in terms of I don't think youth is something that I kind of get the impression when we talk about the offensive coordinators' names who've come out as well. Mm-hmm. So that is Todd. Guys, help me.
Who? What?
The two offensive coordinator hire names. Who are they?
There was Ryan Grubb, and then I forget the guy's last name from the
Tanner Engstrand.
Yeah. Tanner Engstrand. Yeah.
So those two names are not super old guys. They're like in their 40s, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And also notably without much NFL experience.
Right.
Tanner is 41 years old.
Yeah. And he's, for the last 3 years, he's been in Detroit. This past year, he was their passing game coordinator. The 2020 or past 4 years, the 3 years prior, he was the tight ends coach and passing game coordinator. So slight change in title. He's also been an offensive assistant there. So he's been there for a while. So he's got some NFL experience. But then, I mean, should we talk about him first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on Engstrand.
Yeah.
So he makes a lot of sense just because, one, he's like the next best thing. If you want Ben Johnson, you didn't get Ben Johnson offensively wise, or if in a perfect world you could have Ben Johnson, right? Mm-hmm. He's the next best thing, him being the passing game coordinator. He has a rich background with a lot of different run concepts. He can run zone and gap scheme and everything. He can blend it with, a really potent play action game with pocket play action and then the boot play actions. Like kind of all the classic Shanahan McVay stuff that you see. In Detroit, they've kind of been running the like Jared Goff greatest hits during his time with Sean McVay. So it's very similar in that sense. In the drop back game, I really of all like the names that were potential Seahawk hires, it was Johnson and Kafka I liked the most. I like Canellis too for similar reasons, but I like them more over like the pure Shanahan guys like Frank Smith, Slovic, and those potential guys, just because they have a more robust dropback game, some pure dropbacks. And that's where Seattle, when they regress, that's the area where they regress. They don't really regress in play action. So that's kind of, I like the idea of Engstrand quite a bit. Now, obviously, kind of what we talked about with Ben Johnson, you're not going to run verbatim in Detroit what you ran in Seattle, because DK Metcalf changes your concept breadth and your route trees so significantly. Like you kind of have to reconfigure yourself. That's why Shane Waldron didn't run a carbon copy of what he did when he was with the Rams. Like, it's because of DK. And that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. You should be using DK that way. You don't want to turn DK Metcalf into, Cooper Kupp. It would not work, right? Like right. The Rams offense is what it is because of Cooper Kupp, right? It's not right. The other way around.
You just have to mold the offense around the personnel.
Right, exactly. But with that principle, it's like, well, they clearly have done a really good job of that with Jared Goff, because they clearly are like, what does Jared Goff do well? And that's their offense. So they're going to go to Engstrand, would come to Seattle and be like, what does Geno do well? Mm-hmm. I have no questions about the play action stuff. It's the drop back stuff where I would get really excited. In contrast with Grubb, where Grubb would be great for play action and all that stuff, the motions, all that. But you're only talking about 20% of your offense. What are you doing for your other 80% of your snaps? And it's not that I have doubts about Grubb. It's just that because he doesn't do a lot of that, the type of stuff that you would need to do in the NFL, it's hard to evaluate him. The only thing I can say is that he's running an offense in college that lots of teams are trying to run, and he's just running it better than just about all of them. So the principle there is he knows what the meta is, so to speak, because the college game is so different than the NFL. And then so you take that principle, translate it to the NFL, and think, okay, hopefully he'd find the meta and then he could coach that really well. It's just that he hasn't actually coached that himself yet. So I would have some inherent questions. I just think Engstrand is a more square fit. That doesn't mean that Grubb isn't better, though.
Yeah,
right.
And most Seattle-based listeners will be familiar with Ryan Grubb, given he was at the University of Washington. But that's who we're talking about when we say Grubb, and he is 47. So again, not the oldest type of guy, and also zero NFL experience. And like you say, Griff, seeing how that translates, and well, I don't think some of it does translate. He'd be aware of that too. But then, how does he kind of package that together? It's kind of doesn't feel immediately obvious. It feels more doubtful. Whereas Engstrand's actually super interesting. The fact that he was at San Diego with Jim Harbaugh, right? And then he ended up taking over as offensive coordinator there and put up a ton of points also coached the quarterbacks there, the running backs there. Then he was an offensive analyst at Michigan under Pep Hamilton. Then he's been an offensive coordinator in the XFL and coached running backs again. Then with the Lions, coaching the tight ends and being the pass game coordinator. He's got like a real kind of diverse experience, along with, I watched some of that San Diego Toreros 2012 all 22 highlight tape of some center, which he posted it on YouTube, and they are physical and heavy personnel, and they're running the ball. And I think kind of tellingly, if we're talking just about what the Seahawks offense is going to look like under Mike Macdonald and what his vision is for that, he was asked about running the ball, and he said the percentage of when you run the ball and how much and all that, that's all adjustable. But to me, it's going to mirror our football team. We're going to be a physical football team. We're going to have answers. We're going to try to be explosive and really build it around the players that we have, which that's all obvious stuff. And this was a press conference where he kind of said all of the right things. But that kind of physicality, and you think again about the coaches he's come up under, Harbaugh, they're kind of run-first coaches, really. And you could see a much more run-heavy Seahawks offense. I mean, Ty, what thoughts do you have on that?
Yeah, I think with Grubb, it's more about bringing in the mind, or you're banking on the mind, and I think that's kind of the idea with a lot, because apparently a lot of NFL teams have been sniffing around on him for the last year. So you're just kind of banking on that being able to translate and him adjusting for, the NFL. But I feel like Engstrand like represents more of that physical presence the Seahawks want to have, or what Macdonald wants to have, just coming from where he comes from. And obviously you guys mentioned Pep Hamilton last night, and there's that connection as well. So that kind of feels like that's a little bit in line with what you guys were kind of thinking on that.
Right. And it's clear Macdonald's quite excited about the offense. And his kind of philosophy, he compared it exactly the same as the defense. And again, it's an obvious comment. And this comment actually reminded me of what Pete Carroll said after week 12 or 13 of the season, when he spoke about giving the receivers the right stuff, the right routes to get them going. But he said, this is Macdonald today on the radio, well, we've got some guys that can do a lot of different things, and there's a lot of, I think we have a diverse skill set from going against the offense. And then, like he said about the defense, he said, how do we get these guys doing what they're doing really well and put in those spots and try to dictate terms? That's the driving force of all their decisions. So they really want to be a dictate terms team. And I guess in the Grubb sense, that's through some funky formations and some real good constraint screenplays and whatnot. And he designed some really difficult plays. The amount of slot fade they ran to just punish teams for playing man-to-man on them, and how effective Penix was hitting his slot receiver on that kind of pattern. The timing they had, even if the red line and there wasn't much space there, they just had the timing and the placement to get that done. That was a real kind of dictating the terms type of play. Engstrand, I mean, I think I'm quite excited if that would be the guy, because of just his diverse background, and you know, he's the guy supposedly who's done the passing game and got Jared Goff the kind of drop back concepts that got him cooking. And okay, it's cooking the Sean McVay hits, but he's still been able to coach them well and be so successful with them. And when I say the Sean McVay hits which worked with Goff, not the Matthew Stafford stuff, but it suggests he has a real awareness of the details required to coach these concepts. Right. And with Geno, in theory, he can definitely do those things, the Goff kind of McVay stuff, but he can do more. And so if Engstrand can tap into that, and he still has that run game knowledge, the heavy personnel stuff, well, suddenly I'm like, whoa, okay, now we got a football team here. This is going to be exciting. So
we love dig routes, don't we, folks?
We sure do. If you want to look at it this from a really oversimplified lens, with regards to Jackson Smith-Njigba, and the Jackson Smith-Njigba's usage is very important to a lot of people, as it should be. But we have a fascination with him likely going to overtake Tyler Lockett in targets next year, and maybe in importance, we'll see. Engstrand, again, this is oversimplified, but Engstrand would be way better for Jackson than than Grubb would be. That doesn't mean Grubb wouldn't figure it out. Like, yeah, you've got a great route runner who is a horizontal player. It's not hard to figure out for Grubb, but his offense is so vertical. It's just that Engstrand simply has more experience working with that. So if you want to look at it through that lens, like, hey, who's better for Jackson Smith and Jigba fantasy owners? It's Engstrand. You want Engstrand. You don't want Grubb. That doesn't mean that it would be a better for the offense overall. It might be, but just to have that in mind.
And we should say it was Pro Football Talk who reported the Ryan Grubb interest, and then the Tanner Engstrand thing was reported by Albert Breer. He also had interviewed with the Buccaneers for their OC job, and also with the Patriots. So he's doing the rounds.
Yeah, there's been a couple of other outlets have now confirmed the Grubb report as well.
Okay. So on the offense, we were wondering what would be said about Geno Smith in this press conference, given that there is a kind of looming decision around his contract. They don't necessarily have to restructure it. They could just let it play out. He's since been named as a Pro Bowl quarterback, which is one of his incentives for the season. So suddenly he's earned a bit more money of his incentives, but for this past year. But there's something that Macdonald was keen to emphasize. He said he's a really good player. We've played against him. Pretty sure he's at the Pro Bowl right now. We're going to build it around the quarterback. You've got to, just like we said on the defense, we built the system around the players on defense. We're going to build it around the players on offense. And the most important player is the QB. But then he said, so we'll see how the whole situation shakes out over time. Excited to get to meet those guys. Drew, I talked to Gino briefly after our game, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so not necessarily committal, and it's not his decision. It's John Schneider's decision ultimately.
Right.
But yeah, he's kind of just said, again, kind of saying the obvious things. Do you have a read on that?
I think a lot of people took the whole, we'll see how it plays out over time thing. It was like,
shakes out.
Yeah, or shakes out. Yeah. Yeah. That's like directly about Geno. Maybe. I mean, like I don't feel great about it, but also I kind of interpreted that more as, how we build around the like we'll see how building around the quarterback shakes out, like depending on OC, player personnel, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It could be as simple as that. But yeah, I'm a wee bit nervous about that, but also, like you said, it's ultimately not his decision. I mean, like, I'm sure he's going to say his piece on the matter, but and John's going to take that into account. But yeah, we'll see.
Griff?
Yeah, on the it kind of sounded like, they have no reason to hint that if they actually plan to move on from Geno, they have no reason to hint that they would. Because if it doesn't benefit them at all. Like if they're trying to trade him, you don't talk down a player, you always talk up a player to max value, right? And I agree with Ty about what he said about see how it shakes out. I think that was more pertaining to the actual design of the offense. Everything he said is kind of like what everybody says, but it kind of once again reinforces the principle of you build around your quarterback, aka min-maxing, you could say a little bit, is what it sounded like. But it's all of the words you could say, those he said the right words, I think. But beyond that, it's like we won't know till we see it in action.
And his answer on, just rounding up kind of stuff I took away from the offense, his answer on a question about whether like NFL play calling experience was important for the offensive coordinator, he said, that's not near the top of the list. We're looking for the right person to come in and build this thing. So we want someone that's open-minded, has a growth mindset, that can connect with their players and build a system that's unique to the Seattle Seahawks, that's going to live here for a long time, and he's going to be the one spearheading it. So, that sounds like very kind of Baltimore thinking from an organizational standpoint, and that they're going to have an offensive system under him as a head coach, and that's going to be the system, and whoever the next guy who comes in is, they're going to pick up that system and build off it. That's not unique to Macdonald. That's something which long-term head coaches do, but he's on a 6-year contract. I think he's the highest paid first-time head coach in history, which, inflation and whatnot, but it's, suggests he's going to really kind of establish an offense that is long lasting. Even if, as John Schneider alluded to, if an OC is successful under the defensive head coach, they're probably getting hired as a head coach, unless they do a Ben Johnson like this past hiring cycle. But yeah, I mean, that to me was interesting as well. Like they want to dictate to terms offense, and they have a unique system to the Seahawks. Like they're not trying to be a McVay thing necessarily. They're not trying to be a Shanahan thing. They're going to have their own thing. And that's, again, when you're going outside into the college ranks and you're getting a guy from college, a guy like Engstrand, say, who's been around stuff, or even Grubb, who, I mean, I don't even know how you describe that offense. It's certainly got air raid elements, but there's some real pro elements too, right? Like
a lot of max protect.
Like exactly. So
heavier formations.
The back's often in.
It's just the drop. It's just the drop back game that like they don't go over the middle. It's
kind of run and shoot, right?
A little bit. A lot of half field reads, and it's just so vertical.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff there's overlap. Like a lot of NFL teams run those concepts, but none of them run those concepts at that rate.
But
it's like in the NFL, like you can run all those things at a high rate for an NFL rate, but you're still talking about like, okay, you need about 300 other pass attempts. What do those other 300 attempts look like? You know?
Yeah. So you have to max and min, Griff, would you say?
Yeah.
You might even minimize and maximize a little bit.
Wow. But what did you think about that kind of offensive system comment and the lack of NFL experience being like near the top of the list?
I think it's just cool that they're looking in different places. Really, I mean, I think that like really like there aren't a lot of candidates, like there isn't a large volume of candidates right now that have a lot of NFL experience anyway. Like the best of the retreads got hired, like Arthur Smith got hired. He's a good OC. Ken Dorsey got hired. Kellen Moore got hired. Like there aren't a lot of good names right now. Shane Waldron got hired. Like all the guys that have been fired got hired already. All the good ones did. They got hired really quickly. At that point, it's the list is short. It's like, does Frank Reich even want to coach? Right. So it's at this point, like you probably can't do worse than Ryan Grubb right now, or you probably can't do better than him. I mean to say, just like from a very like superficial glance, like the best college football offense, you got that guy's play caller, or at least the OC. Like, okay, sure, why not? If it doesn't work, oh well. Like who are the alternatives? The passing game coordinator, like yeah, he could be the next genius, but what his resume on paper doesn't stack up to Grubb's. It doesn't mean he wouldn't be better, but you can't go in the process of hiring someone, you can't do better than probably Ryan Grubb superficially.
Yeah. Ty?
Yeah. It's at this point it's slim pickings, like you said, Griff. So it's I don't know. I kind of feel like Grubb is almost the Mike Macdonald of offensive coordinator types in the sense like you gotta, if you want to try and swing for the fences, maybe that's the call there. But it depends on how vertical you want to be and how much do you think that he can adapt and be and call a more balanced offense where you still maintain that physicality that you want. I think I'm leaning Engstrand though. Someone that's been around one of the best offenses in the NFL right now, and will bring more of kind of what Macdonald described today. I think that's kind of where I'm leaning right now. But again, there aren't a lot of options at this point that I'm, bending over backwards to get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that San Diego offense. I know the Toreros, they are not exactly a Power 5 program, but they are FCS D1, and they were putting up points in 2011 and 2012 when. So it's very interesting kind of experience, and really kind of. I mean, maybe he kind of knows Grubb from somewhere, but
maybe
very kind of opposite almost candidates, right?
Yeah.
Like or different. They're not opposite, but there's real differences, which again shows that he's open-minded. And I know when he spoke about hiring guys, you know, he wants them to, you know, like he said, like I said, that open-minded growth mindset, and connect with the players and build the unique system. And it could well be that he wants Grubb to kind of bake in some more NFL stuff, but he also wants I'm blanking on the name now, but he also wants you know, a bit more less of maybe a run offense to fit Geno from the other guy.
Like he wants to push the ball downfield maybe more. So
and expand on the drop back game to fit Geno so super and maybe be more of an 11 personnel team given Seattle's strengths in that area and their kind of questions at tight end. So
yeah, from a personal standpoint, I mean they're losing Fant and potentially Parkinson, so maybe with the loss in personnel, if they don't bring those guys back, maybe it does make more sense to go more 11 personnel.
So that's kind of what I had on the offense. If there's nothing else, should we transition to the defense?
Let's do it.
Shall we?
So the significant news in terms of defensive coordinators today is that Zachary Orr, who we wondered if he would be heading to the Seahawks, Brady Henderson of ESPN wondered that. He was the Ravens inside linebackers coach the past 2 seasons. Well, Orr is not going to be the Seahawks DC because he's now the Ravens defensive coordinator. So that's the kind of one obvious option off the table. Anthony Weaver is a name, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know though. I feel like he has too much experience to want to essentially be just like the understudy of Macdonald.
Yeah. I mean, he's Baltimore's associate head coach and D-line coach. You think another year, if their defense plays well again, he might be up for like a head coach job or like an actual DC role where he is the dude and gets the kind of shine without the defensive head coach above him.
Yeah, I believe the Commanders interviewed him.
Right. So that kind of leaves a question, and with what we've said about the DC position and how Macdonald's still going to call plays, and he's going to, you know, it could just be anything. Like we spoke about potentially an older candidate. I know there's some like positional coach options still with the Ravens, even though they're was it their DB coach? He went to the Titans.
Yeah.
But I know there's some like they have an outside linebacker coach who's been there for 1 year, like maybe, but that seems a bit lofty. Yeah, we'll have to see how that shakes out. And obviously they're kind of vying with Jesse Minter as well, who's now the Chargers DC under Harbaugh. He'll probably be looking to hire similar names. So we're not closer to the DC hire. I think they're probably prioritizing offensive coordinator, but in terms of getting the positional coaches and stuff, we're actually further away from knowing kind of names with this news that Zachary Orr has been promoted at Baltimore.
Right. So, again, by the sounds of it, it seems like he wants to go young with it and have it be someone that eventually, works, ideally, someone that eventually works into play calling down the road.
Right. Yeah, I got that vibe too. That when he said like when they're ready, like you think Weaver is ready, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing is like I don't think that Weaver would want to come here knowing that he's not going to be calling plays at first.
I think Macdonald is very much in a I've got to call the plays mode to make sure everything goes right out of the gate type of beat right now. So yeah,
that seems pretty important to him.
Yeah. But it begs the question though, how the heck does he fill out his staff? Because like the DB coach, the linebacker coach, they got hired, and Weaver's probably going to stay put. So
especially with him being a younger guy who, I mean, Schneider remarked on how many connections he has and how he's impressed by that and how he was a good type of networker, right? But he's still only 36 and he's still been, in one organization for since 2014 with just the 1 year out in 2021 under a different Harbaugh, albeit in college in Michigan. So we could get some real there's obvious names, right? But then the names which might come out might seem very out of left field because they're guys he's maybe connected with. He spoke about how when he was at college, he was able to visit other programs. Maybe there's like a DC or like a spicy up and coming positional coach who's like a genius who just gets hired on staff. You know, I think we could see that type of stuff happen.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So in the rest of the Baltimore defense, it was interesting because he was asked about the origins of Baltimore's defense. And, you know, because obviously while it's something he's taken up and run with, he kind of grew up in the system and then put his own spin on it and streamlined it to be kind of more college-like in their kind of modular way of doing it. Their one-word stuff to get into a real versatile amount of calls, but with like different types of personnel on the field and be able to adapt each week and adjust each week. But he credited, you know, his time in college for that. But he also then mentioned Rex Ryan and Jim Johnson as the kind of base arena for where that was expanded on. And then all the other Ravens coaches that they've had, like a name which comes to mind, who I know has been really schematically influential throughout the league, is Marvin Lewis.
Right.
But I mean, Rex Ryan, that's obviously your 46 Bear stuff, and you're kind of bringing intense pressure. Jim Johnson, that's your over fronts, your fire zones, your stuff very similar to kind of what Steve Spagnuolo's now run with, and that's who he came up under. So you've got two big names there. And then he mentioned we took it a certain direction given the players we had. So I'd say it's adaptable, but we're always going to be aggressive on how we want to do it. You know, people ask about our blitz rates and all that. That's just not important to me. It's about putting yourselves in positions to win the down, affecting the quarterback, putting you guys in position to have success, which obvious, but you kind of stuff we expected. And then on the radio, he said how we're always trying to dictate the terms as much as best as you can do to the offense. That's easier said than done because the offense is trying to do the same thing to you. So there's a little bit of back and forth to that. I think one of the principles of the organization I was at in Baltimore is we want to be aggressive and we want to be pushing the envelope. So how do you do that while being smart with the resources that you're allocating? You know, you want to have maximum return for minimal investment, meaning it's easy to blitz zero, as in cover zero, every snap if you want, and you can apply pressure that way. But you can also do it mentally and by how you play and the things you're presenting to the offense, because they got a lot of stuff going on over there too. If you can apply pressure over games, it's hard to do consistently for 60 minutes, which is basically his philosophy of they send for a lot of the time, but often it's your non-traditional for. Often there's a guy dropping out, you're exchanging, and also you're bluffing and all that type of stuff. So Griff, we've got a lot of work to do when it comes to finding out about this defense. Don't worry, I've got a Jim Johnson playbook. I've got a 3 Rex Ryan things. Got a Rob Ryan 2011 thing. Marvin Lewis.
We got to get a hold of Wink Martindale at some point. Dean Pease. So the principle there is like, you know, you mentioned all these names, all these history, and then you talk about and you relate all that history to Mike Macdonald's comments about, well, it doesn't really matter how much you blitz. It's about what's necessary for, you know, what the circumstances, the conditions of that down is, right? Offense and defense and everything. And the point there is that these playbooks are vast and they change over time. But what defines a defense is what areas of the playbook you live in year to year. And that applies to all sorts of defensive trees and stuff. Like, you know, Brandon Staley in the second half of 2022, the Chargers, when their defense was actually playing really well, he was living in part of the Fangio book that intersects heavily with kind of like classic Legion of Boom, Gus Bradley part of the Carroll defense. And then this past year, when they, for the Seahawks, when the first 8 games when they were playing well, there was actually quite a bit of intersection with what Macdonald's doing in Baltimore. So the point is like, yeah, like all these playbooks have all sorts of calls in them, but what you end up being is what areas you live in, what packages you build out of, how many layers you add in and stuff like that. Macdonald definitely, though, is more than willing to switch up his game plan and kind of go be Wink Martindale for a game if he needs to be for 1 week, or spend a couple of drives like that. I'm really curious to see if taking that principle and applying it to Seattle, is he a little bit different than he was in Baltimore? And he kind of said, like, I'm not necessarily trying to be what we were in Baltimore. It's going to depend. Yeah. That said, though, because if you isolate the strengths of what the Seahawks did do well defensively, there's quite a bit of overlap with what he did in Baltimore. So it might end up looking really similar.
I saw the tweets. I saw the screenshots.
Like they don't rush 5 very often, but when they do, it was really good. Both the Seahawks and Ravens, like when they rush 4, but they drop a defensive lineman and then they send a linebacker, like Jordan Brooks actually has a higher pressure rate than both Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen. Not that that's the way you should evaluate the entire like simulated or replacement pressure package, where you're blitzing a second level defender but still only rushing 4. But it's just to like, he's like, oh, these guys are actually kind of good at like my schematic niche is attacking protections with minimal investment. Doing it with 4 and 5 instead of 5 and 6 on average, So it's, we're going to see how that ebb and flows. He'd like to use a lot of man coverage this past year. I'd be curious to see if he feels like he wants to do that again with the personnel he has available to him. Maybe he wants to do it even more, maybe with Devin Witherspoon playing nickel instead of Kyle Hamilton, even though Kyle Hamilton can definitely hold up. Like, he's not a twinkle toes. Like, he's a safety background nickel, right? Devin Witherspoon can go mark up on prime Wes Welker if you want, right? So it's maybe he thinks, well, maybe I'll do even less cover 3 and even more cover 1 in my 1 high stuff. I'll be curious to see if he feels the need to disguise as much. I
think disguise is a fundamentally important aspect to it.
I would agree. Absolutely. Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
Now, it's just been pointed out in the chats by Matt. Thank you, Matt, saying that Marvin Lewis is joining the Las Vegas Raiders as an assistant head coach, which, again, that would have been a kind of senior name. Also in the chat, Dean Pease, who was with the Falcons in 2022 as their DC. I know he announced his retirement from football, but that is for the 3rd time. So maybe at 74 years old, turning 75 in September, maybe he could come back for a year as a kind of like senior body. But I kind of think, again, we're kind of repeating ourselves here, but don't think youth is something that Macdonald's afraid of. But what I'd say is, given this is his first chance as a head coach, and putting together a staff is difficult, and his inexperience in that area, in a way, it means he comes at it with a fresh lens, and he might do something really cool and innovative. But it's also going to make it tough, I think, and especially being hired late in the cycle. Other teams have made their moves, and other teams are kind of ahead of it, like that kind of thing of Lewis getting on board with the Raiders. So that's kind of all interesting. Now, Griff, to your point about the defensive direction, he said how offenses out there are too good to run 3 things and just say, hey, we're going to beat you. So philosophically, again, I think we're all in this thing together. The players need to know that we're trying to put them in advantageous positions. So we're constantly trying to give them little margins of advantages. Then he said, the system that we run is built on concepts that are adjustable and we can layer it together. And, we're not going to get there overnight. It's going to be a process, but we have to understand what it takes. And then finally, he said, the spirit of how we play and the principles of how we play, which will be aggressive, dictating to the offense, probably some type of too high, and then that kind of max return for a minimal investment. So all that stuff. What you've seen on the tape in Baltimore, that will be the same. But I can't guarantee you the schematics will be the same here because, we're not sure what we're good at yet. And Griff, that's kind of to your point. I mean, what fits Seattle? You could argue Seattle has a better defensive line talent than Baltimore. They could do with a big type of edge. You can argue they're more dynamic, to use that dreaded word, up front. You could also argue that Jordan Brooks as a weak side backer is better than Patrick Queen. Certainly different types of players, right? Now, maybe they move Brooks to Mike. You can definitely say as well about the Seahawks secondary, there's some spots where they're better than Baltimore. So, and just different types of players, right? not that they don't fit necessarily the kind of 3-4 scheme and stuff like that as well. So very interesting to see kind of how the play calling happens, but nothing that Macdonald said was like, whoa, that's unexpected. Like, it was all kind of, the whole presser was like, yep, that's smart. Yep, that's what a football coach would be saying in his kind of way and his direct way of speaking. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the general vibe, right? That I got was he's a football coach. He talks like a football coach. Cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Like nothing really out of the norm. Like, yeah.
John brings up a cool point. So we don't know if Mike Macdonald is connected with this guy. As he said, when he was in college, he was able to visit some programs and kind of pick up on stuff and how they were doing things, because college coaches are pretty good. But Jim Leonard is a very interesting name. He's currently served as Illinois' senior football analyst. He was interim head coach at Wisconsin, but obviously before that was their defensive coordinator since 2017 to 2022. He has some really good ideas in the college world. I don't know if he'd like be willing to, he's 41. I don't know if he'd be willing to go, hey, like, yeah, we're going to run your thing and do it your way. But he certainly had some innovative ideas and did some really creative stuff there, kind of in a 3-4 world, right? More kind of odd front structure. And we'd expect Lewis to mainly be like a nickel, even front team, even though it's a hybrid system where you got some 3-4 elements baked in. But that's an interesting name, John. And Leonard is still available. He's still on the open market, right? Okay. So if that's offense, that's defense, that's offensive coordinators, that's defense coordinators. Final thing I wanted to talk about was the organizational similarities and then Macdonald's personality. So it's not a surprise because
not the hoodie and blazer combo.
Okay, yeah, Ty, go with that. We've already talked about most attractive NFC West head coach.
Right.
Where are we at with the hoodie and the blazer combo? Because at first I was like, that's an interesting shirt. And then I was like, is that a hood?
It's a hoodie. It's very Kendall Roy.
Yeah.
Schneider said something which was really Kendall Roy.
He did. He did. The marketplace comment. He's changing the marketplace. You've seen the product. Yeah, that was
no. There's something else. There's something else. Hold on. Let me get that up. Yeah, Ty, how are you feeling about that?
It's a power move. It's a power move. I like it. You look around the league. You look at like Dave Canales. He's wearing a dress shirt, tie. The usual. Like it's not often you see a coach show up in something like that for his introductory press conference.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's not messing around. Clearly, that's what that says.
You gotta watch the Baltimore tape and see if you get any backwards hats.
Right. Yeah. And I'm not. People have asked. I'm not doing the fit tracker for Coach Mac. He's got to earn that. But, but yeah, he's got big shoes or rather a big hat to fill in Seattle. So. He's playing with fire because he wears it pretty much every game. So we are undefeated.
This is the thing Schneider said, which was like, so he was asked how Macdonald changes the marketplace, and Schneider immediately responded, "He's a disruptor." Yeah, that's very Kendall.
Yeah.
He just needed the right cadence, and he'd have come off true Kendall. But Schneider was kind of. I think he's working hard. Is how I would describe it.
I think he needs a couple nights of sleep.
Yeah,
I think that would do him some good.
Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah.
So one thing we didn't speak about is with the hiring of Macdonald. Do we think he came back on the plane after his first interview? It didn't come out like that because Schneider said how they picked him up from the airport. Him and his wife.
I think it was like they met him and they were like, "All right, get your stuff together. We're
booking
back.
your flight.
Yeah, we're gonna book your flight.
Yeah, get on the plane.
Yeah, just like we'll give you a few hours to get ready and get your things together, and then get your ass to Seattle."
And Adam Schefter reported that apparently Washington tried to call him while he was on the plane or something.
This is also very succession-y. Huh.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are we finding out right now that Mike Macdonald is kind of Kendall Roy coded?
No, he's a killer. He's the Shanahan killer.
Yeah.
Shanahan is Kendall Roy. Let's not forget.
He's what Logan envisioned for Kendall, hoped for Kendall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I always thought Pete could be Logan, so I don't know who's Logan now in this.
I don't know if Pete's Logan.
No.
Pete's more like Connor.
No. He is competent.
No, he it's
He's
Connor.
Ewan.
It's Connor with. Yeah, no, he's Ewan. Yeah, he's Ewan.
Okay. So on the last two things on the McDonald presser. So not surprising, given he's been in Baltimore since 2014, right? With that year out in 2021 in Michigan, but he mentioned the similarities, the parallels between the Ravens org and the Seahawks, and he said how the special people in the building and special communities very similar to here, and he really is looking forward to building the relationships. He said how the Ravens org is a special organization, and that's two things these organizations share in common. And he also said how the first thing that really popped in his right at the start, he said the first thing that really popped was the parallels of the organization that I've been working for 10 years, and where he is today. It was extremely appealing to me. And to hear John Schneider talk about people and how important that is was the driving force of why we want to be here. And when he said we want to be there, he turned to his wife in the crowd, and Schneider grinned at her. So that's all cool. Ty, is that kind of alleviating your concerns about the going from Carroll to which you're going from Carroll? And I thought when he was asked about Pete Carroll, I thought he answered that question perfectly. As is expected, but he spoke about authenticity and not being Pete, being himself, and all that stuff. But yeah, are you chill now? Like the guy's not going to be a total maniac.
Yeah, like I said earlier, like I feel like he's going to be a pretty authentic dude, especially like in front of the cameras and all that. Like I'm interested to hear what he has to say, which is something I couldn't say about some other Seahawks coaches in recent years, particularly an offensive coordinator. Anywho, so yeah, no, I like him so far, and I also liked what he said about Pete and the culture in his radio hit that he did right after, where he said, like, we're going to talk to the players, and if they like certain elements of Pete's culture, we're going to carry that over, no big deal, and then we're going to do some new things as well. And like he does seem like he's going to be very respectful of that, which is all that I wanted, right? When we talked about this a few weeks back, I said that I wanted them to do, whoever the new head coach would be, I wanted them to do it their own way, but I did want them to respect the culture, and it seems like we're going to get that.
Yep. Totally. I get the sense too. Plus Schneider's there too, right? And like Schneider's proud of his past work too, right?
Yeah.
It's part of his legacy as well, right? So
yeah.
Yep.
And then the final thing on his personality, I mentioned how he's speaking player first, but he spoke about wanting to generate a relationship with them, constant communication, telling them the truth, telling them with love, and the consistency. So, I mean, he sounds like you've heard all these players come out and speak about what a great coach he was. Humphrey, Carl Hamilton, all these other guys. They were cool. So
he seems pretty laid back. Like I watched that podcast that you posted on Twitter last night, the one that he was on. I watched about like 30-40 minutes of that. And like he opened up, and he was like, I don't know if the mask necessarily came off, right? Because he's pretty similar just doing the press conferences, but he seems like a pretty just normal guy, and I feel like it's going to be worthwhile actually watching his press conferences. Like I don't think he's going to play stuff too close to the vest. Like I think we'll get interesting little nuggets and insight. So. He seems like one of those guys that will actually, talk ball.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
should come on the pod.
yeah, I think we could work that out. We could probably get that done
Let's do it.
eventually.
Let's do it.
If you look at like the Baltimore stuff, like you said, Ty, the press conferences there, the beat reporters are asking him detailed questions, and
Yeah, they're great.
He's replying in a smart way, like he's not going to tell them the whole source, right? But he's giving them real, like, detailed nuggets. So
It feels like
mean-
he's like kind of going up to the edge of that, like of what he can say.
Mhm.
right.
Yeah.
And this guy is he's one of us. He's a tape junkie. He grinds the tape, and he's always talking about how the tape is important. Now he said about pushing the envelope is and something about edges in his
Catching the edges.
catching the edges, was it?
I believe that's what it was.
That was something that for some reason didn't come out in his press conference. Schneider got a lot of questions, but when it came to the radio appearance, he's like, that's going to be a big thing about like what we talk about around here. So catching the edges is his thing, right?
Yeah. By the way, Griff just sent an interesting tweet from a certain Seahawks Twitter insider.
Our
Oh.
Pal Whitney says Ryan Grubb is the leader in the clubhouse. Now she broke the Macdonald news first before any blue check did.
Yep.
She also said that she also was able to confirm that Chip Kelly and Dan Quinn were an item, and that seems to be taking fruit in Washington. So
Yeah. So
she knows.
on Twitter user Just Whitney at Trump Lost Suck It, they've been very reliable on this. So seems like Ryan Grubb is close to being the Seahawks offense coordinator.
Okay.
So that is fascinating. That's
Yeah.
the type of hire where you're like, what? How? And it obviously leads to kind of chatter around, oh, hang on a second. Ryan Grubb coached Michael Penix, and he is a quarterback, and he is eligible this year. And the Seahawks pick at 16, and Penix isn't quite in the top 3 discussion, but the Seahawks pick at 16. So could they perhaps draft Michael Penix,
I was told today
quarterback?
that they're going back to Drew Lock.
By who?
They're going to sign Drew, and then Gino's out of here. That's what Twitter said today.
Oh, right, after passing the McDonald comments. But
also Jordan was right. It's chasing the edges, not catching the edges. I don't know where I got.
So chasing the edges is the statement.
Whatever.
That's still that's interesting. I look forward to that becoming a thing. Learning a bit more about it. That would be immediately my next question would be, what does chasing the edges mean? But yeah, so yeah, Griff, quick thing on Penix in Seattle. How do you that we should very quickly say that just because you're hiring a guy's play caller doesn't mean you just hire the draft the guy, especially when you've got a quarterback like Geno Smith, who
that also assumes that he's even there.
Yeah.
Who Geno Smith, despite being the 6th most pressured quarterback in the NFL, despite having average time to throw and also not getting sacked much because he was getting rid of the football, despite being the 6th most pressured quarterback, was a top 10 passer in the NFL by pretty much most of the advanced metrics. And then when you account for garbage time, he's firmly inside the top 10. And so he is 33, turning 34. Maybe Schneider is itching. He's like, oh, yes, finally I can take my QB. So, Griff, if it is Penix, a left-hander who's currently at the Senior Bowl, and we'll have Senior Bowl tape breakdowns coming. I've got the film. So, Griff.
There we go.
Yeah.
Penix.
I don't think Seattle takes him. I don't think Seattle drafts him. I think so with Penix, there's lots of things you can say about him, lots of good things. It's for a different reason than Russell Wilson, but he does not go over the middle. And then this is actually different than Russ. When he does go over the middle, he's also quite bad at it. Like his numbers are bad. When Russ did go over the middle, his numbers were good. But it was kind of like a selection sample thing, or like a selection bias thing with his decision making. Even when Penix does go over the middle, it's not. I don't know why. He's just not very good at it. And so you think about Jackson Smith and Jigba, like Jackson Smith and Jigba and Michael Penix Jr. are like oil and water. Now, yeah, the slot fades will be fine. The out routes will be fine. I just don't think those two are meant to go together. And then John Schneider was in the building toward the tail end of Russell Wilson's tenure with the Seahawks, and there were some rumblings from some of the coaches that it was actually kind of frustrating with some of Russ's habits and that they weren't able to be coached through. I think that Penix is certainly coachable, but he may not improve in that area, and I don't know if Schneider will want to go in that direction. I think he'd rather, if he's going to get a developmental guy, he goes someone with like Jordan Travis or something along those lines. I don't think it would be Penix, as great of a college quarterback as he is. Plus, there's also the injury history. I don't know how Schneider views that either.
Yeah, it seems unlikely, but maybe if the price is right, like maybe there's something where the teams are so good at gauging where guys go generally, or maybe he goes in the third round, because that's not out the question. I know there's a big hype around him, and when I tweeted after the national championship, just off the body of work, that he was more like a third round guy, people eviscerated me. But right. You kind of saw the challenges of his transition to the league and what they're going to be. The over the middle stuff, the kind of disguise, along with the injury history. There's a lot of questions there, but we'll probably get to dive deep into that. We also need to do our Geno Smith defending
That's right.
pod, which is ridiculous. That has to be a thing. Keep an eye out on SeahawksOnTape.com. Later tonight, I will be posting a Geno Smith article.
So on the quarterback thing in general, real quick, I mean, Geno's presence doesn't have to preclude them from taking a quarterback in the draft and setting him behind Geno. And, by virtue, drafting a quarterback doesn't necessarily mean that Geno's gone, right?
Right.
I'm fine with them doing that. But when Schneider held his press conference before this one, like the one a couple weeks ago, he made it sound like whoever they hire at head coach, they're trying to have that head coach have them take that next step or help them take that next step and compete for the division right away, championship, all that stuff right away. I just don't see how you're going to do that in year one with any other quarterback that is feasibly available that you can feasibly get. That's not Geno, right? So, and there's a non-zero chance that Schneider's future in Seattle hinges upon the success of the team in 2024. So if he feels some sort of pressure in that regard, I don't see how you can seriously say that you can compete for the division and more with anyone that you can feasibly get other than Geno. So maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't see it. I don't see it. And then like if you sign, like, what are you going to do? You're going to sign Kirk Cousins?
Yeah, I mean, you can't. Geno is honestly, they're very lucky that they've got Geno at $30 million right now.
Yeah.
They can't trade up into the top three. There's already teams trying to get up there. The top three teams might even use with their native pick to go quarterback. And it's just draft someone in the mid rounds.
Yeah,
take a developmental swing at them, sure. But like the best option through them, the best midpoint of quality of quarterback and cost is the guy you already have, and then just be and also the contract is so advantageous to you that ride this year and then reassess the quarterback market this time next year and see what decision you want to make with Geno.
Yeah, because like I don't understand. My view actually on the Geno thing is you don't really have to do a restructure or anything. I mean, he may be wanting one in terms of like offering him a bit more security, but like his cap number, right? This past year was $10.1 million. Okay. This year that's going up to $31.2 million. But so it's a, $20.1 million rise. Just get rid of get rid of the people we've spoken about getting rid of, like, and get, draft, supplement, fulfill those things. Like there is, I know Seattle's kind of tight against the cap, but with a couple of moves and suddenly that rise in cap isn't as great. If you need to restructure it and give him an extra year, maybe do that. Whether he'd actually want to do that, or if he's going to be like, okay, I'm going to bet on myself this year and just earn a nice chunk. Which remains to be seen. But like,
if you restructure it, I mean that does complicate things a little bit in terms of wanting to move on the next year. But you could, even if he has a decent year, I feel like you could trade him even with that contract, because again, relative to what other quarterbacks are making, and relative to what his production level is, and just the style of quarterback that he is, and the talent and the talent level in general, like that's a bargain. So
yeah,
I feel like restructure makes the most sense here, because like it does complicate things a little bit, but it's nothing that's I think you're losing sleep over.
Yeah. So real quick, Preston says, thank you, Preston, so much for the donation again, Preston.
Thank you, Preston.
You've been coming in hot recently. Appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
Mike Macdonald mentioned in his presser that he has had an affinity for the linebacker position. What he actually said was, let me find it. Oh, I don't have it open. Great. Anyway, I'll find what he said exactly. Do you think Seattle would consider drafting a prospect such as Edgerrin Cooper to mirror Brooks, presuming they move on from Bobby? Well, Preston, I'll immediately say they have to draft a linebacker this year. They've kind of neglected that position for quite a while in terms of the draft. They've tried to fill it in budget ways, like, for instance, going and getting Devin Bush as a low-cost free agent ad, and it didn't really work. He looked all right, but then he didn't. He looked okay. Maybe someone you consider bringing back, but Brooks, he can play Mike. It's whether he can stay healthy is the unfortunate question mark recently. But he can play the Mike. He's a really good Mike. And then the weak side type backer, you can get, like, you should be able to pick that up in like later rounds of the draft. I'm talking like third round potentially, rather than spending a premium pick on it. Or you have to re-sign Brooks, or you could go, there's a blue chip dude. I know there's that guy out of Michigan. Is it Colson?
Yeah, Junior Colson.
I don't know how high he's going to go necessarily. I know Junior is actually a junior, I think. So he's a bit younger, but it kind of all depends a bit on testing. Because if a guy's 240 plus pounds and runs a 4.4, 4.5, that's like that's like a real dude. They're getting rarer and rarer and rarer. Brooks is one of those guys. That's why he went back end at the first round. Queen was slightly lighter, but his ability to run as well was why he went so high, along with they had good tape as well. But so that they have to. I don't think the affinity thing's necessarily that important. He mentioned how his comment was, how did they end up coaching the defensive side of the football? He said, offensive guys sometimes don't get along too well. It just started when I coached high school football at Cedar Shoals and had an affinity for the linebacker position. It went from there. Because he also coached running backs, I think, in that high school position when he was coaching in 2010, I think it was. So I wouldn't read... Like, he definitely likes linebackers, and that's cool that he likes inside linebackers, off-ball linebackers. Look at his success at the Ravens with... Roquan Smith and how he transformed the defense, as we've talked about the data. And if you go on Griff's timeline, he's tweeted the data out of the splits between before and after Roquan was acquired by Baltimore, and then Patrick Queen, what he did there and how he kind of got him playing more to his draft pick and playing just better, right? But they have to draft a linebacker. They had to draft a linebacker anyway. Maybe this makes it even more definitive, but really, if you want to play a good defense, you need good inside backers, you need good off-ball linebackers. Despite all the positional value talk, which is really fun, you need good off-ball linebackers. Look at all the good defenses in the league; they have good off-ball linebackers, or great even. Griff,
they should sign Cody Barton.
He could be their Patrick Queen, actually.
No, he couldn't. He couldn't. He could not be their Patrick Queen.
Why not?
You can't blitz him like that.
Would you like to know Cody Barton's pressure percentage this year?
I would like to know the sample size.
Indulge us.
Let me look it up. Cody is a good blitzer, though.
He's
Always has
okay,
been.
but he's not a Patrick Green type of blitzer.
Yeah. Anyway, point being, yeah, he likes linebackers. So that does give me some encouragement that they'll try to retain Brooks.
Yeah.
I think that's really important that they'll value the position in the draft. I don't know. I think there's some commentary on how they use Queen that they kind of know that, like, they wouldn't overinvest at linebacker at the same time, because there's kind of commentary on what you think of a player in terms of how you use them. Queen is playing his best ball, but like prior to this point, he wasn't, and that's because they've kind of shrunk his role a little bit so that he can be in his wheelhouse at all times. So I think, I don't think he'll force a linebacker. I think he'll only get a stud that he really likes, Yeah. So beyond that, I mean, I'll just echo what you guys say.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting seeing this defensive scheme because, like, I think almost sending it off-ball linebackers as a ways of getting pressure means you don't always need the best edge types, right? It kind of alleviates having the stud edge rusher type. But Seattle also in their edge types, they have guys who are more almost suited to dropping a bit more often than say like a Jadeveon Clowney, who you don't really want to drop too often. Even a Van Noy at this stage in his career, you don't want to pass drop much. And a lot of the times when Macdonald drops those guys into coverage are the D-line types, but also the outside edge types. He's not asking too much of them in coverage, especially on the interior. They just pop in to engage and then dropping out if the center slides to them and playing cover zero behind it, but with those underneath guys getting to their landmarks, which aren't too strenuous. They're just designed to remove like the second slant window, basically, or the drag. But where I'm going with that is it's almost Seattle's roster's in a better position to from the edge types in terms of their ability to drop into coverage, where and Brooks is a pretty good blitzer, right? And has a lot of tools. So they kind of, it's almost, I wouldn't be shocked if rather than, there's a positional value thing which comes into it, but if there is that stud linebacker, draft him in the first round and he adds so much to your defense, he adds the kind of blitzing potential, because right now I don't know if Seattle doesn't have that at all because Brooks isn't on the roster technically either, but like that's kind of where they're light. It's like the inverse of Baltimore to a degree.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Of off-ball linebackers that have at least 10 pressures, Cody Barton is second in the league in pressure percentage.
How many times was he blitzed?
30,
how many times?
30 times.
Right.
So 6.6% of his snaps.
And then so Brooks twice he was blitzed. How many games did he play?
10.
Right. So he's blitzed 3 times a game, and he had a what percentage?
37.5. Jordan Brooks was blitzed 38 times. Because he didn't have a full snap count, right? And then what did
this is so ridiculous because they're very different play calls.
Look up Queen's numbers.
So Raquan was blitzed 84 times. Queen was blitzed 92 times.
But wouldn't Barton's blitzes have all basically been in with man coverage on the back end, and they're like cover one no rat or zero?
Probably.
Yeah.
Can you stop trying to dismantle our narrative?
And then Bobby was blitzed 10% of the time, which is roughly similar-ish to Raquan, and Queen has about the same pressure percentage, 18.6, same as Raquan anyway.
Okay. Right.
Anyway,
Thanks for that.
All I heard was Cody Barton has a higher pressure percentage. So
yeah, it's the only thing that matters.
That's what I heard. So
okay. Finally, and if you got questions in the chat, please do ask them because we've got 150 people in here. Also, like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow Griff at C Mike Spin Move, follow Ty at Ty Dane Gonzalez, follow me at Matty F Brown. Corey asks, have Matty or Griff gotten their hands on an old Ravens playbook yet? What do you think?
We got our hands on something.
Yeah, it's not that old.
Something.
Kind of recent, actually. Anyway, thank you, Corey, for the question. Yeah, the research is going well. I got the Michigan 2021 tape as well, Griff. And we got a question saying, will you guys be doing Ravens defense film reviews this offseason? Why the hell not? Absolutely.
Yes, indeed.
We'll try not to get too caught up in what they call things, but yeah, we'll break some stuff down. Like I said, I'm starting. Well, I've watched most of this season now, but I'm starting at the Michigan 21 stuff, then seeing how that compares to 2022. There's also let me promote this actually. So Gala Family Benefit Clinics. Okay, so Coach Adam Gala on Twitter has always been super helpful to both Griff and I, and a lot of coaches and kind of budding guys who are like enthusiastic about learning stuff. Back in from January 30th to February 2nd, 2023, there was this Gala Family Benefit Clinic for crushing cancer because unfortunately Adam's wife, Kinsey, was diagnosed with a rare and highly aggressive form of breast cancer. That raised a lot of money, these clinics. So buy the clinic, right? Gala Family Benefit Whiteboard Clinic. Buy the clinic, and inside there, because it's for a great cause and a great guy, and inside that clinic is Jesse Minter, the Michigan defensive coordinator at the time, now the Chargers DC, going over how their kind of coverage and how they game plan their coverage choices for every down, every situation. And also inside there is Mike Macdonald. And he's talking about how they design their pressure packages and how they kind of build it all together. And he uses a great slot machine thing. So I will tweet out. Let me put this link in the chat. I don't know if it will work, but buy the clinic. Just buy that because it's a great cause. And both those clinics are excellent. And it's Coach Vass hosting them. So he he asks all the right questions as Vass always does, and it's really well put together. There's like 2 hours of excellent content, along with all the other coaches who participated in that are absolute dudes. So, yeah, that would be my recommended stuff, and that's also stuff that we've done research on to help us when we do look at the Macdonald defense. Okay, that's about it. Any other breaking news, or are we out of here?
I think that's it. I think that's it. We got the Whitney tweet. Talked about that for a second. Yeah. It seems like there's a lot of smoke around Ryan Grubb, though. Maybe we'll hear something tomorrow.
Yep.
Let's get grubby.
Grubhub, etc., etc., etc.
Okay. Right. Thank you so much, chat. We'll be back, probably not tomorrow, but we will be back, of course, with coordinator reaction, positional coach stuff, and we do need to start the Geno Smith kind of argument before that kind of period passes, before any breaking news happens around him, if there is some, and we need to look at the Mike Macdonald scheme, how it's going to shake out in Seattle. Why it works, how it can be beat, all those problems as well. Jen, why should I go to the cinema?
Go to the cinema for what?
For what? For why?
Mean
That's
Girls,
such a
the
random...
musical? You gonna go see that, Matty?
Am I the mean girl?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got a little Regina George.
Jen, you're gonna have to explain that to me. I don't get that. Yeah. So in the last podcast, people said some mean things about how I look, but someone said I'm Mike Macdonald. Is that a thing?
Okay.
Not really, right?
You look like Mike Macdonald.
Yeah.
You look like if Ewan McGregor played Mike Macdonald in a movie about Mike Macdonald. And the 2025 Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks. Is that right, folks? Am I right?
That is
Am I right?
Right indeed.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
All right. Hit it, Matty.